Hello and welcome to today's webinar, How to Get the Most from Your MBA. My name is Sarah Monroe-Joyce, Manager of Campus Admissions. Kurt Wang, Executive Vice President of Marketing, Admissions, and Corporate Sales will be our moderator today. Kurt, before we get into our panel discussion on how to make the most of your MBA experience, I'd like to ask you a few questions about the Lake Forest MBA program overall. So Kurt, there's many reasons why people would decide to earn their MBA. For instance, many may want to increase their marketability, many may want to take their career to a new level, and some just love to learn. There are obviously lots of great reasons, but we all know that these are challenging times. How do you know when it's the right time to make that investment?
Hey, great question, Sarah. Actually, in this competitive environment, it's more important than ever to be a well-rounded business person. And as a business school, we interact and research with a variety of companies in the area, and we look at everyone from Abbott to ITW, Allstate to Motorola, and big or small, no matter what industry or what company, we definitely see a common trend. And what we've seen is that most companies are going through some type of reorganization to reignite growth and innovation or to be more competitive, in this really challenging economic environment. So, my guess is that it's true for most of the companies of the folks who are on the call today. Companies are changing their organization charts, they're taking a fresh look at talent, and the criteria to succeed has really changed in the last few years.
That's an interesting point. Could you elaborate a bit more?
Yeah, so it used to be that, there was just a straightforward career path. If you were great in your function, a great engineer, a great salesperson, a great IT person, HR, etc., that was good enough. You could kind of see what the path was and the next steps up, and that path was clear. It wasn't necessarily an easy path, nor a path that everyone could take to the executive suite, but you knew the steps to get there. But with all the disruption in the economy, certain qualities are now in demand. What we found through our research is that organizations want broad thinkers and strong leaders, and that's what we really teach at Lake Forest Graduate School of Management.
The phrase broad thinkers and strong leaders is used a lot at Lake Forest. What exactly do you mean by broad thinkers and strong leaders?
Well, companies are looking for four things that you might consider fall under broad thinkers and strong leaders. One is, who has the flexibility to thrive and adjust and the agility to take on different roles and responsibilities as new strategies need to be executed. So, for example, the other day I was talking to a high-level executive at Baxter, and he said that, the way people get promoted these days is much different than the way they've been promoted in the past. What he said is, again, along that clear career path, but what he said is, the people who are getting promoted in our organization today are the people who take on major projects. And they're just, and it may not even be, specifically around their function. It's the people who take on those major projects, lead those major projects that cut costs or find new ways of revenue that are really challenging to do, that have elements of change management. It's those people who have the flexibility that really make it. And these are people who embrace change. They're people who lead new strategies, and they're people who are really, really effective collaborators. That's the type of thing we're talking about when we're talking about broad thinkers and strong leaders.
Great. And now for today's webinar topic. But before we get started with our panel discussion, I'd like to take some time to explain the format of today's webinar. We've developed a list of questions that should help answer the question, how do I get the most from my MBA experience? However, if you have a follow-up question or need clarification from one of our panelists, I encourage you to participate. We will have an open Q&A period at the end of today's discussion, but you can pose questions as we go along. When you do have a question, you can type your questions into the box located at the right-hand side of your computer screen. Kurt?
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so let's get our panel going. Today, we're going to tackle the big question, how to get the most out of your MBA. To help you answer these questions, I'm joined by three panelists, Steve Gadomski, Soo Granqvist, and Nakisha Hunter. Panelists, could you introduce yourselves? Maybe tell us a little bit about your title and company and how you came to find LFGSM and why you chose LFGSM. Steve, you want to kind of
Sure. This is Steve Gadomski. I'm actually the founder and CEO of a company called Vantage Point Benefits Advisors, which I actually founded after I graduated here in 2003. And my connection is very active alumni. The program certainly helped me round out my skill sets back when I was just a sales manager many moons ago, and really helped give me the confidence to step out and take those new projects and new endeavors.
Great.
Hi, Kurt. This is Soo Granqvist. I'm the Senior Manager of Marketing Program Management for CDW, and I'm a 2009 alumni of Lake Forest. I chose Lake Forest because after examining a lot of Chicago area schools, I found the instructors at Lake Forest were all working professionals. So it's important to me to learn from people who had real-world experience.
Thanks, Sue. Nakisha?
Hello, my name is Nakisha Hunter. I am a senior research chemist and group leader for research and development, L'Oreal USA, where I am charged with the product development for hairstyling products for the U.S., South Africa, and Brazil. I am a new graduate of Lake Forest Graduate School of Management, 2011. As I was researching other MBA programs in Chicago, Lake Forest really stood out to me for their values for real-world experience, and specifically their positioning on how to develop your own perspective from your particular functionalities and how you can integrate that throughout the business, throughout the other courses of the business. So that was very exceptional. I really liked Lake Forest because of the way that they taught students how to think from your own perspective. I learned how to leverage my R&D experience and how to translate that with other forms, for example, marketing, operations management, and financial accounting. So I really thought it was a wonderful experience.
So Nakisha, why did you decide to get an MBA to begin with? I mean, it sounds like you're a chemist. Is that true, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So why would a chemist need an MBA?
I think it's important for someone with a science background. You learn not only do you are stemming from a technical standpoint, but over the years I learned to be more. I became more interactive with marketing and sales, and I really wanted to understand from what position they were coming from an R&D perspective. It's very beneficial for a scientist to pursue an MBA, especially at Lake Forest, because one, I noticed that my background was at that time limited. All I pretty much understood was the technical, a lot of physical chemistry, biology, biochemistry. But as I was interacting with marketing people, they wanted to understand how does my development and my crafts, how can it relate to someone without a science background. So when I took classes like marketing, sustainability, and strategy, I really understood how to integrate my technical experience to be able to relate that better.
Great. Nakisha, that's very, very helpful. Sue, why did you decide to pursue an MBA?
Well, I had done, over the course of my career, a lot of different roles, primarily in engineering groups. I'd also managed large groups of people, so I had some HR background. I had tried a little bit of everything, but I felt like I was missing that connect the dot sort of thinking that was cross everything. And one of my bosses at the time said, you really need an MBA if you're really going to get that kind of across-the-board view and understand better the financial aspects of the company and marketing and sales, as Nakisha said. So when I got into the program, that was my expectation. It was what I wrote down on my first day of school when they said, write down for yourself what your expectation is and then come back at the end and see if it met it. And by far, I thought that the program really filled that need for me and really helped me understand not only my own role better, but how my role relates to other groups in the company and how I could be a better manager all the way around.
Oh, that's helpful. And Steve, did you come into the MBA program thinking you wanted to start your own business? How did that happen?
Yeah, I started. I was with Motorola, this late '90s, sales and marketing guy, and as I was working more with engineers and finance, I realized my calling is I've always loved numbers and math, and it just I was working with a lot of analytical people, so it's kind of the similar experience, the opposite experience, Keisha, in that you're good externally, but I had to get my internal skills and analytical skills rounded out. So I was at Motorola, and then my dream was always to start my own business. The question was, I knew that was going to take probably 4 or 5 years, and so really it started from, this would be a good thing to round out my skills with a practical program, being able to apply that. That was in the days when Motorola divested tons of their businesses. That was kind of the glory days, and in terms of the opportunities there, and so. But it led to me confirming my entrepreneurial skills, which I was always taking new projects, new business, new markets that, it rounded out my skill sets that eventually I basically wrote my marketing plan while I was in school.
So let me ask you a bizarre question. Why spend all that time and money being in school when you could have just spent that time and money just starting your business maybe a couple years earlier and just get it going? Why invest that time in an MBA? Some would argue if you're going to start a new business, just go start a new business. We don't need MBAs.
Right, right. Well, I would say one of the things when you learn having a good education and so forth is 96% of businesses don't make it in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I looked at as I want to be in the 4%. So I've got to have the skill sets, I've got to have the chops, the substance, and so the program really I had a good undergrad. I went to Indiana, but I was 20 years old. So when you're in your 30s and late 30s, you really want to see. I really wanted to challenge myself, and I had the substance, by taking the other classes and learning those skills. So when I start the company, I at least have a core foundation versus just go for it. And
right,
because the odds are.
So you're one of the 10% who made it.
So far.
Well, how many employees does your company
We're
have?
still building. We only have 5 employees.
Okay.
But we're looking at substantial growth next year. So we'll.
Great, great. So Nakisha, so you got your MBA. You're a chemist. You got your MBA. Did anybody care at work? I mean, I'm sure you didn't get a license plate that just said MBA on it, right? And so so you're in the scientist world, right? And you get your MBA. Who cares? Did anybody care?
No, my company did care. Once I received my MBA, I've been working. They've appointed me to several committees. Mm-hmm. One was the Committee for Sustainability. I talked to my company about me taking the sustainable business course. And with L'Oreal, we have a strong position in sustainability, especially with us partnering with NGOs. L'Oreal has a strong position with technology and it being more sustainable with their cosmetics and more savvy. So as a result of my MBA, I was able to leverage from the R&D perspective. I was an R&D person, and we had someone from the company who was a member from the marketing position, and we also had someone from HR who talked more about social responsibility. So I was able to, as a result of that, I was able to leverage some of the information that I learned from my MBA program to work with marketing and work with HR on how to bring about some of the technology to make them more sustainable.
Great, and by the way, folks who are listening, I don't know what answers they're going to give. So as a good lawyer should never ask a question that they don't know the answer to. Good thing I'm not a lawyer. So would you have gotten those opportunities if you didn't have your MBA?
I would say maybe yes or no. I may not have understood it to the extent that I as a result. Sometimes you may learn things over time, but as the MBA really brought about, number one, the networking. People who are at the same level or even maybe higher. I had a classmate who was the vice president of research and development, and he had some actual experience, but I think the theory that came about, as well as the networking from a different perspective from another industry. He was in the pharmaceutical industry where I was in the cosmetic industry. Kind of similar but different regulations. So from a technical standpoint, we were able to talk, but from a different barriers and regulations, we were able to learn different things from each other. So I believe that the MBA brought about so many other networks that it would not have had ordinarily, and even as a result of the classes and because of the promotion, I may have been able to understand some of the social responsibility things or why L'Oreal was coming up with some of the goals and strategies.
Right. So you found the networking you get through the MBA program very helpful. Sue, has the networking helped you while you were a student or alum at Lake Forest?
I'm always saying that the network that comes along with the Lake Forest education is probably one of the more hidden benefits that you don't necessarily think about when you join a program like this. But I can tell you that just from my own networking within Lake Forest, there's a Lake Forest graduate in almost every major company in the Chicago area. And right before I graduated, I was laid off from my job and went and talked to one of the deans to get some advice as to how to go about a job hunt. I hadn't actually done one in quite a few years, and he kind of was like, "Well, you have the best tool right in front of you with the Lake Forest alumni and current students." And so I was like, "I can't just call up somebody I don't know and ask them for help." And he's like, "Well, everybody at Lake Forest has something in common, and so we did a few calls while we were sitting in the office. I went home. He said, "Now go home and do that, 10 times a day until you find a job." And I did. 6 weeks later, through the net. It wasn't directly connected to the network, but it was a friend of a friend through the Lake Forest network. I tried networking a lot of other ways and had varying degrees of success, but with Lake Forest people, whether I knew them or not, whether they had graduated, recently or 10 years ago, every person I reached out to unequivocally offered to help. And the alumni directory, the current student directory that's on our intranet that you have access to when you're a student here, has a bunch of different ways for you to search the database. You can search by company, by job title, by region, and you can find, if you find a position you're interested in, you can locate a Lake Forest graduate person who is in that company, possibly even in that department, and get that leg up networking-wise. And not only did I use it for myself, I reached out on behalf of my husband, who got laid off a couple weeks after I did. We both found jobs doing that. I've done it twice since, and absolutely cannot say enough about how important that network aspect is when you join the Lake Forest family, because that's what it kind of feels like.
Great. So I'll just kind of open it up randomly now. So anybody have a great experience how Lake Forest helped them while they were in the program? So you're in the program, right? You don't have your MBA yet. Anybody have a story that talks about that?
I'll start off, I guess. This is Steve. One of the things about the program, it's a very practical program. I think it was touched upon in Chicago. It's one of the best programs if you're looking for, that type of program. And the practical side, why it's important is I would do projects at work, bring them to the team. You get usually with a team that you become like brothers and sisters with over the course of the time. And that's
which means you fight from
right.
But it's actually an element of the program, I should add, that is a tremendous asset that was a benefit that came from that to add to this. But also, we would actually work on projects that were for work. I'd bring them to the team in various classes, and vice versa. The other folks in your team would do the same thing, and we'd actually help each other out with real practical applications.
It was one very unique experience. While I attended Lake Forest, I took one of the global trips. There was a global European trip, and my project was with St. John Innovation Center. And they had an operational project where all of them were like chemists or all had a scientific background.
And where was it?
And they were out at University of Cambridge, and we partnered in our program with St. John Innovation Center. And I was the only scientist, again, a part of our project. But one of their issues actually was brought back to mind the issue that I had earlier in my career, where you had a new innovation, and it was all technical. And their problem was, how can we relate this technical innovation? Why is it not really showing any type of profit? And that situation, as an MBA student, I really learned then. I wish I had those experiences several years ago. I may have been able to solve my own problem, but I actually was able to understand where they were trying to relate a type of innovation to a different culture where they were not used to. So I was able to, as a result, I was able to use some of the things that I learned from global cultural diversity as well as some innovation and risk to be able to help them bring some kind of recommendations to help them present their findings. And as a result, even when we got back to the States, they really loved our presentation so much. My group did a webinar for their board of directors.
Wow.
To help us, to some of our recommendations.
That's really interesting. So Nakisha, you graduated what year?
2011.
Okay, and Sue?
2009.
2009, and Steve?
2003.
Steve, so we've got a wide range of memories here.
Yeah.
The folks on the phone, hopefully they join our program, and they graduate in 2014, 2015, right? So they may be sitting where you're at today. But what advice would you give someone who's entering an MBA program, whether it's ours or elsewhere, on how to, as the title of the webinar suggests, how to make the most out of that program? So we know MBAs are about the degree and after the program, but how do you make the most of the experience itself?
For me, the program itself is so, I guess, for lack of a better word, tangible, in that you're working with a team. If you do the program in 4 years, you're with that same group of people for the whole 4 years. If you accelerate, I did the program in 2 years, you meet so many different people throughout the course of that program in different disciplines. And I think for me, making the most of it, and I've been at 2 companies since I graduated, has been to continue to leverage those relationships, not just in the networking way I discussed before, but I actually had an operational problem at work, and one of my teammates was a director of operations. I actually called him and said, have you ever run up against something like this? And he said, oh yeah, absolutely, and he gave me some ideas to go back and try, one of which actually worked very well for us. So I feel like in addition to just the learning, the textbook learning that comes out, there's just this ongoing learning and sharing of experiences with the overall community that, for me, makes me feel like I have a serious edge at work. It's not only what I took away from the program, but I kind of feel like I've got this entire group of people behind me, so if I don't know the answer, I can always call somebody, so I always look really smart, no matter what. Right. But you know, making the most.
Phone a friend.
Yeah, it doesn't end with the day you graduate. I think that's the biggest message I take away from that is to make the most of it. It means that it just keeps giving to you as you keep going along. If you continue to use that information and the people you meet along the way.
Okay. Any other thoughts about how to make the most of their time while they're in the classroom and going through the program?
I'll just hit on more of the, you know, you've got to have the true desire to want to do this, because if you're doing it for I need the shingle, it's a little old school. You know, it is such a commitment, and for the family, if you're married, I had 2 small children. You know, it actually became an anchor for me that knowing every Monday night for 4 years, that's what I did. That was there, but it's because you had, you know, I really had the strong desire to learn and achieve, because there's going to be bumps along the way that's going to, or opportunities, could be change of employment, companies are sold, whatever your situation, and that you want to still persevere and finish that. So it's mine is more the wild card is in the spirit. You better really want to be able to do
You get out of it what you put into it.
Right.
Yeah. Great. Well, you know, I mean, that's an interesting question, because, you know, one of the things I personally have become a big believer in is the importance of higher education, period. Whether you're getting a master's in liberal studies or, you know, a master's in arts or whatever, you know, there's value in higher education. And so I know as panelists you probably haven't been thinking about this, but I want to pose the question, you know, has the MBA been valuable for you in ways that just aren't about, okay, I was able to move a project faster at work, or I was able to get a promotion? You know, has it been valuable in your life? And I know that's kind of a bizarre question, but I want to know if there's any thoughts about that.
I would say most definitely. When I initially started, I think I was one of the youngest in my class. I may have been like early 30s. And as a result of my Jabberwock teacher, I ended up...
oh, you may want to...
I'm sorry.
You know what the Jabberwock is?
Jabberwock. Okay, that's one of the great highlights. If you join Lake Forest, you will all have that Jabberwock. It was from effective communications. And I think one of my issues, I used to be really nervous about giving speeches and extemporaneous speeches. Jabberwock was such a fun, light-hearted thing. My professor was a member of Toastmasters International. So I actually joined the local Toastmasters around my neighborhood. And as a result of that, I've actually kept in contact with my professor. So it really brought about a different confidence. I was so used to giving a lot of technical presentations, and outside of that, that brought me so many other confidences. I've become more of a role model, done a lot of
So when you became comfortable with speaking, that brought with it confidence as well as opportunity.
Exactly.
What I think was that Gail?
It was Van Pelt.
Oh, okay, great. So for those of you who are, you won't know who those folks are, but I was just curious. Okay, any other thoughts about how it sort of, you know, maybe improved the quality of your life somehow?
Well, I know for myself, the writing, you know, we do, at least in my role as program manager, writing is a huge part of it. A lot of upward communication as well as lateral communication, and just the discipline, you know, you kind of don't love it as much when you're doing it, but in the classes you do a lot of writing, and you find that by the time you come out the other end of the program, you've got into a different type of a writing style, a different type of a writing discipline. that just sounds, I think, more professional because you just do it over and over and over again and in different capacities throughout the classes. So now, even though I've just been at this role about 6 weeks, I've already started having people send me emails saying, can you recraft this for me, or this is going to the VP, can you check this for me and see, because the writing it's just something you kind of take with you, and it's so important when you get in the business world too, because you do so much of it in the classes.
Great. So just a couple more questions. So what advice would you give folks, all the folks online are probably looking for different MBA programs and trying to figure out what's the right program for them, and hopefully this program is the right program for many of them, but it may not be for all of them. What advice would you give them as they do their search for their MBA program?
I would say I think it's important to have a clear picture of your goals. What do you want as a result of your MBA, and looking at each program to understand what exactly their niche is. One particular program their niche may be their brand. They have a strong brand, and just to say you have an MBA from this school, that people may think that it'll open a lot of doors. There could be another university where their niche is, we really take personal professional development to you. And that's really the one thing I really loved about Lake Forest. They really invest in your own personal professional development, as not only as a student, but even as far as an alumni. I know as a result of my working with Lake Forest, the Lake Forest Corporate Education has actually come to our company. I was the first for my company to actually complete the
right, so Lake Forest Corporate Education is our training division from the school, just for folks.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we've leveraged a relationship with my company as a result.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically looking at your goals, what are some of your goals, and it's actually studying other programs, and not only going to listen to webinars such as this, going to the events, even speaking to some of the alumni and some of the current students to get a full glimpse about if the program really will meet your own needs.
Right. So what Nakisha is suggesting is it's important to actually see a class in action, to talk to alumni, talk to students. Would you guys agree with that? I mean, why is that so important?
You're going to spend a lot of time with this program, whether, however, quickly or slowly you go through it. It's very time consuming, as we've talked about, and you need to know you're with people that you're comfortable with, that the learning pace is one you're comfortable with. So definitely visiting the classroom, for me it was talking to alumni. There was a lot of alumni in the company I was at the time I was looking at schools, and everybody spoke, very highly of Lake Forest, and then, see the classroom, talk to the professors, and just see if it clicks.
Right.
Great.
I'll add just that, I have friends, and my wife went to one of the other schools in town, and from a practical perspective, this program is definitely, Lake Forest knows where they fit in. I mean, if you're looking for other things, to Nakisha's point, but from a practical program, this is, really the leader in Chicago, and I looked at all of them myself, and depending on what you want to get out of it. So just keep that in mind, that it is very practical, and to my peers here, you can apply it immediately to your current and also future, and gives you the confidence as you step out of your comfort level. And all of you that are considering are certainly in that position. You're obviously leaders, and you're thinking of higher education, but you can feel confident everybody at this kind of program is in the same boat, and it will be a good experience.
Great. So one final question, and then we're going to talk a little bit with Eric, who's in charge of our career development area. But before we do that, several times, several of you folks have mentioned, well, this is a rigorous program. It's a challenging program. It's a big investment. How did you fit it into your life? Right? We're all busy professionals. There's a lot going on. Some people have kids. So there's work, there's school, there's family, other obligations, there's travel. How do you fit an MBA program into your life, and how do you make that work for you?
Well, I think as a program manager, the first thing I would suggest, you got to have a plan.
Right.
You have to kind of sit down and decide exactly how much time you want to devote to the program, which will probably determine how fast or slow you want to go through it. But probably just as important is to engage your family and the people you work with. Let them know you're going through this. You need their support. You need them to, I was lucky with the boss I had at the time. It was very understanding. I'm like, I have a paper due tonight, or I need to practice my presentation. Can I leave a half an hour early or whatever to do that? But, you know, my husband, of course, cut me a lot of slack. I missed a lot of family things there for a while till I got my footing of how much time it took me to do homework and such. But just get your support network around you, get everybody engaged. You'd be surprised how much time you can find in a day to get, you know, homework done, get your reading done if you just put your mind to it. But you've got to plan out your time. You know, it's pretty clear with the surveys that are done at the end of class. You'll get asked how many hours outside of class you spent, and then the school sort of aggregates all that information, and you can get a pretty good idea by class how much time it's going to take you to complete everything outside of the classroom. And then, you know, you just sort of fit it in. I used to books on tape. I drove around a lot. I had a long commute. I listened to a lot of on CD or on my MP3 player toward the end, and just literally sitting at lunch and reading my books. And you can totally fit it in, but it does. You got to plan for it. Absolutely.
Great. Any other thoughts?
I would just echo the same. I think it becomes, you just do it. It's like if you train for anything, whether it's a marathon or whatever, you get into a regimen pretty quickly that is very manageable in a crazy kind of way. You just fit, you know, it's just another 10 to 12 or whatever hours it is. It just becomes part of your life.
Right. So the final comments, and then we're going to switch gears, is this is a big commitment. You know, it takes a lot to get going. How would you encourage people to go ahead and do it now, right? You know, because there's always a lot of things in our lives in this economy that are fighting that says, hey, you know, you need to spend more time at work. You know, you need to spend more time with family. You know, what's the rationale for doing it now?
Don't wait, because there's always going to be a distraction. There's always going to be something down the road. I waited a long time, you know, and so my advice is, you know, we all love to see what the next 5-10 years look like, but in today's world, you know, don't wait. Go for it. You'll figure it out. I started out with a company helping contribute. By the end, I was paying it for myself because I wanted this to happen. So.
And I've always gone by the philosophy, don't put off tomorrow what you can do today, and look at it like this. You never know where your position you could be in 5 years from now. If you start this program now, you can be in a different economy, a different financial position, even a different position in your career-wise.
Great. Well, thank you so much, panelists. Now we're going to talk about another way that you can make the most of your career, and LFGSM really is interested in once you become a student and then become a lifelong relationship. And one of the ways we help students and alumni is through our career services resources, content, and process. And today we have with us Eric Medina, who is our Director of Career Development Services. And Eric, welcome.
Thanks, Kurt.
So can you share with us how you work with students and alumni?
Absolutely. And before I get too far into that, I did want to just highlight a couple things I hope people picked up on as we heard from our panelists. One of the things I've been very impressed with about the community of Lake Forest is this opportunity to learn from very practical, professionals, not only your classmates, but faculty, staff, and administrators. And one of the, coming into this role, I've had an opportunity to see the real value of those experiences and how that's helped support some of the efforts that people have around the career. More specifically to your question, Kurt, one of the things that I offer for our current students and alumni would be our one-on-one coaching services. Additionally, we have a career development series that we've run for most of 2011. We actually ended our last one last evening.
And these are a series of?
These are a series of workshops lasting about 2 hours at a time. We run 4 per series, typically on topics related to career development. So managing your personal brand, hidden interview skills, how to prepare a professional-based resume, things of that nature.
Right, and this would be open to students, alumni?
Open to current students, alumni, friends of Lake Forest, and we've had an excellent turnout for the 4 we've had. We're looking to reprise those most likely at the top end of 2012. And more on that certainly as we get there. In terms of the one-on-one coaching, we might address for people very tactical things, so issues around how do I write my resume, how do I get it reviewed. We may move then in the coaching relationship into more strategic questions or issues, things related to activating your job search. I think people heard a little bit that people were at that point in their career, and how do you do that the most effective way, and how do you be accountable to the process, which is a challenge sometimes. And then as I develop my strategic plan here over the next few weeks, and it's been in process now for just a few weeks, there will be more formalized content and coaching support and services available to current students and alumni.
All right. So basically what you're saying, Eric, is if you join Lake Forest, that we have a set of career development services for you today to help you throughout your career. So if you're in the program 2 to 3, 4 years, you never know what's going to happen in this economy with your career. That you've got a little bit of a network there.
That's absolutely right. So we want to make sure that not only do you have your informal networks that are in the classroom and the like, but you have formal resources as well, and that's what we're in the process of developing and creating.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Eric. Did you have anything to add, or panelists, anything to add? Okay, so with that, with the time we have left, I'd like to open the discussion now to any of you on the phone. Feel free to type in a question in the question box on the right hand of the computer screen. And do we have any questions yet?
Let's start with her.
Okay, so if any of you have questions on the phone, please feel free to ask. So maybe I'll ask the panelists one other question. So now that you've graduated, right, and you've had some benefit of the MBA, how has your perception of the MBA changed? Well, you just graduated, Nakisha, so maybe a little bit more for Sue and Steve here. How has your appreciation, or maybe depreciation, hopefully it's appreciation, of the MBA changed as you've had some distance from the program and over time?
Wow. Since I'm the old guy here, back in the 15 years ago, I think a lot of people went back to just get that, because that would help them in their career at the organization. And I think today it's more important to do it to balance your skills and round them out, because you'll be more marketable. If there's a tie between yourself and another person for a position, I certainly think this would, make you stand apart. So it's now become more, I think, a little more self-preservation. Yes, if you work for a large company that has resources and so forth, that certainly helps. But I think it's only going to separate, you from the pack.
Great.
I think the program forever changed the way I look at things. I mean, instead of just reading Crane's kind of in a gossipy way and, who's doing what, now I start looking at it and going, I wonder why they're doing that. I wonder what's going on behind the scenes. How's that going to impact, business in this area. I just find myself thinking on a much more strategic level about everything. And when I graduated, I kind of heaved a sigh of relief and thought, what am I going to do with all this time I now have back? And then when school started in the fall again, I kind of felt bad that I wasn't picking up books. And I'm kind of thinking about what's the next degree I want to get. Because it's almost like once you get in that mindset, you can't,
right.
You can't stop it.
I personally believe learning is part of quality of life. So one of the questions that just came up is, folks have different types of bosses, and absolutely there's some managers who are telling you to get your MBA. Some are actually push our students out the door to get their MBA. They wouldn't have gotten it on their own. But there are students out there who really want to get their MBA, but in this tight economy, it's kind of challenging to get their bosses on board. What advice would you give them to really sell the MBA to their manager, or how did you get your manager on board with getting your MBA?
Well, one of the things they get, I know when I was here, and I'm sure it's still the same, you get a sheet at the beginning of each class that sort of outlines what the learnings are for that class and what the expectations are for that semester. I took that into my boss at the beginning, and now I did go ahead and get into the program, and then start bringing him those sheets at the beginning of each semester and saying, here's what I'm going to learn this semester, here's how I think I can apply that to my job, and sort of engaged him and the VP above him in oh, look what I'm going to learn, and can I get involved in some of these other decision-making processes so I can kind of stretch and exercise these new learning skills. Until before long, I started having them sort of asking me at the end of each term, well, what grade did you get? How'd you do? It was almost like once you got them going, they were interested too, and they wanted to kind of help me bring that into work. They figure if they're investing in helping me go to school, they want to get something back out of it. So it was important that I told them what I was coming back with.
Oh, great.
I also think it's a good idea. I'm sure many companies, and on mine, we had like managerial appraisal performances. You can take a look at your goals, whatever the goals that your company or your immediate manager may set for you from a business standpoint, as well as from a professional standpoint rather. Taking a look at the course objectives, and even just Lake Forest in general, where we always tag know the business, get the results, and they come up with an actual plan to explain how at least the core classes can always turn back and relate. Now, my company was very impressed with the innovation and risk and the sustainable businesses. That pretty much helped them really go ahead and do a lot of support.
Great. Well, thanks so much, panelists. At this time, we're going to bring the webinar to a close. On behalf of our panelists and the rest of us here at LFGSM, I'd like to thank you for participating in today's session. There will be a short questionnaire at the end of the session where you can let us know how best to follow up with you. Sarah Monroe-Joyce, one of our admissions managers, will walk you through the next steps. So, Sarah?
Thanks, Kurt. A great way to cut through the clutter of the MBA information about LFGSM or any other school that you might be considering is to speak directly with an admissions advisor about your specific needs, interests, and aspirations. And we can assure you that when you walk out of your interview, you'll know if getting your Lake Forest MBA is the right decision for your life and career, and if right now is the perfect time to start. Also, please make a note for your calendars that our next preview event will be held on Saturday, December 3rd from 9 to 10:30 a.m. at the Lake Forest campus. Thanks so much for attending this webinar.
Thanks, everyone.